Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Franz Kolb. I'm the Director for Diplomacy and Protocol in the Governor's Office of Economic Development. I do have an accent, and I'm originally from Austria, Salzburg, Austria. This is a really great audience. I know most of you here. I should also I'd like to do a special welcome to your the Excellencies, but I've got some students here from the University of Utah, from the Diplomacy, Protocol, and Networking course that I teach up there. So this is exciting. There are a few students here. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so grateful for Utah Valley University. And I see people from Greece, from Italy, from all kinds of other parts of the world. This is from Spain. So this is fantastic. We do have some honorary consuls here that I would like to recognize. And I would like to recognize the Honorable David Utria, Honorary Consul of Peru. And is there any other honorary consuls? Oh yes, of course, our good friend, and I can never pronounce his name, from the Honorary Consul of Romania, Mirza. Okay, that was with a German accent. So we are delighted. But, ladies and gentlemen, we are delighted today to have an incredible panel with us. And what we're going to do is I'm going to give every panelist 2 minutes of introducing him or herself to us. We have a series of questions that then I will ask, and some are easy, some are tougher. And then in the back here we have, if you'd like to have some questions, if you write some questions, please put them there. Then at the end or during our discussion, I will ask this question to the panelists. I do need to mention to the panelists, whatever you say here is on record. And it might be, I don't know if the university will broadcast it. I'm getting some great royalties from the university for my picture, so I hope you'll do the same. So with this in mind, I am delighted to introduce, let's go in this alphabetically, with the Honorary Consul of Peru, the Consul General of Peru, the Honorable Ronald Denegri. Then we're going to have the Honorary Consul of the Consul General of Romania, Mr. Cosmin Dumitroscu. And then we have the Consul General of Spain, Ambassador Francisco Javier Vallaure de Acha.
That's too long.
And then we are delighted to have the first Secretary of the Ugandan Embassy, the Honorable Michael Bulwaka. And then we have the Honorable, we have the Deputy Consul General of the United Kingdom, the Honorable Collette, Weston. And we are delighted to welcome the Deputy Consul General of Vietnam, of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, the Honorable Ngo Quang An here. And it says here, accompanied by Consul Le Tam Trung. So we are delighted to have you here. If you could start with Peru, Consul General, if you could give us just about a 2-minute introduction, we would be very grateful.
Yeah. Well, good morning, buenos días. I am Ronald Denegri. I am the Consul General of Peru in Denver. Well, I am very glad to be here. Thanks to the Utah University Valley for the invitation. Well, I have been appointed Consul General in Denver since January the 1st. And it's my first time in Utah. Well, I am a career diplomat. I am minister in the diplomatic service of Peru. This is my third post abroad. I work in the Peruvian embassy in Brussels from 2000 to 2006. And then in the Peruvian embassy in Argentina in between 2009 and 2014. Well, again, thank you very much. I think that it will be a very interesting conference, and I appreciate to be here. Thank you.
Let me ask you just one question that maybe each dignitary could answer, and that is, what's your hobby? Let's just get very informal. What is your hobby?
My hobby, well, I like sports very much. No, well, I play tennis, no, since I was a child. I like to run and well, and to read a bit.
Thank you so very much, Consul.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Cosmin Dumitroscu. I'm the Consul General of Romania in Los Angeles. I feel such a great pressure from the Spanish language here with Peru and Spain. But I'm so happy that Mr. Kolb pronounced my last name with a German accent. Thank you very much for that. I just kind of missed that. So, making it short, I began serving as the senior diplomat of Romania on the west coast of the United States in March 2017. I'm a career diplomat. I served the Foreign Service of Romania for the last 15 years. I served in Italy 2 times, in Rome and Trieste, and I served in Spain before coming here, of course, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Romania. So nobody's perfect, and as I want to be sure that the speech of a diplomat does not become boring, because usually politicians are annoying, we diplomats are boring. I'm just kidding, of course. I was looking forward to participating to this conference because I consider that this very interesting part of diplomacy, the academic diplomacy, brings progress and also brings topics very interesting for everybody, the civil society, for economists, for diplomats, and also for politicians. And I congratulate the University of Utah, of Valley, for this fantastic initiative. And I promise to be here for the next years just to discuss matters that interest in both the United States of America and Romania. And I just want to remind everybody that the last year we have, on 11th of July, we have 20 years of strategic partnership between Romania and the United States. And looking forward for discussions today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Consul. Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you, France. Well, thank you, France, for inviting me for the second year in a row to this conference. Let's make my name shorter because it's too long. I insist on this, but there's no way. Which is just Javier Vallaure, and that's it. Because otherwise, Acha comes from my mother's side. And in the United States, it's very difficult for English-speaking people to say Acha. Then they say Aga, which has nothing to do with Acha. It doesn't look or nothing. Then I always insist, friends, Javier Vallaure, and that's it. It's the simplest way. Well, I'm a career diplomat. I joined the Foreign Service in 1979, before Christ. Then I've been dealing with international affairs for almost 40 years. I'm about to retire in a year and a half. The diplomat will retire, not Javier Vallaure. I hope God will give him enough health to go on. And I have served on the 5 continents. I was born in Germany because my father was a diplomat. I'm a 3rd generation. My father was a diplomat too. He was his first posting. And my second brother was born in Germany too, and the youngest one was born in Washington, D.C. Then this is a multinational, this is a multilateral family because my wife, she's Brazilian. Then half of me, I'm Latin American. My 2 kids carry both passports, Spanish and Brazil. And I served on the 5 continents. I've been ambassador 4 times in the Netherlands, in Angola. Africa really hooks you. I love Africa. I served there. It was my 2nd posting in Africa. I've served as an ambassador in the Netherlands as well. And a multilateral organization. This was the only time in my life where I dealt with these issues that I don't like, really. Multilateral issues. Well, I don't like them very much. I'm a traditional and conservative diplomat from the 19th century. I love the bilateral relationship with the countries and with people. But anyway, let's defend the multilateralism as well. And I've served in an organization called OPCW, which deals with the prohibition of chemical weapons. It's an important organization. During my tenure there, the organization got the Peace Nobel Prize in 2013. And well, this is my third time in the United States. You have to cut me off because I'm a kind of a preacher. I talk too much. But this is my third time in the United States. My father served here as a second posting for 7 years. I was Consul General in Miami some years ago. 6 years plus the 4 years in LA makes in total 17 years. And I know this country, I think, pretty well. I'm very happy to be here for the second time. Thank you, friends.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We had the opportunity a couple of years ago to have Dr. Baldomero Lago receiving the highest award from the King of Spain. And we had a wonderful ceremony in the Gold Room. And so thank you, Ambassador, for that recognition on behalf of the state also. Yes, sir. We'll go ahead to Mr. Bulwaka, please.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Bulwaka. I'm a first secretary. I work with the Uganda Embassy based in Washington, D.C. I'm a career diplomat as well. I've been in the Foreign Service of the Republic of Uganda for about 12 years now. The U.S. is my second posting abroad. I've been in the U.S. now since the summer last year, in July, so it's just a few months, but I'm already I'm already excited about serving in the U.S. My first diplomatic tour was in the People's Republic of China, where I served for 4 years, and then here I am. I'm very honored to be here and be given the opportunity to participate in this diplomatic conference. And as one of the speakers said in today's opening session, diplomacy is really people-to-people engagement. Many times with diplomats, I accused of pushing too much paperwork, but little face-to-face interaction. And today gives us that great opportunity to come here in the great state of Utah, at Utah Valley University. It's my first time to visit Utah and to be here at the Utah Valley University, so I'm really honored and looking forward to engaging in discussions that really enhance our knowledge exchange and understanding of one another. And as I said, as human beings, we have similar aspirations. We all want to prosper, we all want to have great jobs, have economic progress, and well, that's what it's all about. And that's why we diplomats do what we do passionately. So I'm looking forward really to have very fruitful discussions throughout this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bulwaka. We are very honored and welcome to Utah. Now we have Ms. Weston from the United Kingdom, please.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Is that working? Is it on? Is that better?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Collette Weston. I'm the Deputy Consul General for Great Britain, UK. I am based out of Los Angeles, and I've been there for just over 9 months now, so I'm a relatively new arrival. I've been in our Foreign Office now for 16 years. And I've been previously posted to Mumbai, where I was for 3 years. And then I had a role where I covered wherever they needed an extra pair of hands. So I worked in 15 different countries in 2 years when I was doing that role. I could give you some boring facts and figures about trade between the US and UK or how important Utah is for us. But I always find that that's the moment where everyone starts to kind of knock their head and fall asleep. So I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'll give you a little... So my kind of hobby thing is basically I am a film geek. Before I joined the Foreign Office, I managed multiplex cinemas in the UK. So I'm basically a film geek that accidentally became a diplomat. So a posting to LA is pretty much like letting me loose in the chocolate factory. So I'm having a fantastic time, but even more so, I'm loving getting out and about around our patch. From LA, we cover Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Hawaii, and Southern California. As you can imagine, having a consular area that also covers Las Vegas, we get lots of interesting stories of what happened in Vegas, and lots of people in our waiting room on a Monday morning of people looking quite sheepish and hungover because they had a fantastic time, but now they're coming to see us for an emergency travel document. So that's me in a nutshell.
Great, thank you so much. And now, Mr. Deputy Consul General.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Deputy Consul General of Vietnam Consulate in San Francisco. I've been in the United States for 1.5 years. I enjoy my work and my life here in the United States. This is the very first time I have a great pleasure to visit Utah. But this is the second time Vietnam Consulate has joined in the international conference on international trade. And I will take this opportunity to thank Utah Valley University and the Governor's Office for extending an invitation to Vietnam Consulate for the second time. And I would like to say that before moving to the United States, my portfolio was about economic affairs and economic collaboration among countries in Southeast Asia. And therefore, I'm very hopeful and keen on how to strengthening the investment and trade ties between Vietnam and Utah, because I want to focus more on the collaboration at the state level, because I think that at the state level, we can do much better and we can do a lot of practical things rather than at the federal state. Last year, it was a great honor for Vietnam to welcome Governor Gary Herbert during his trip to Vietnam. He brought to Vietnam a very big delegation with a business mission as well. And this year, I'm thinking of the ways to bring more business mission from Vietnam to visit Utah. And I arrived yesterday afternoon, and I had a chance to take a tour around the city. And I was much impressed by the breathtaking views from the state capital. I stood there and looked over to the range of mountains with the top of the mountain covered with a lot of snow. And I love snow so much. And I also visited the Temple Square and to understand more about Mormons and the history of Utah. And I enormously adore the history of Utah. When I read about the founders of Utah, they traveled 1,000 miles away and worked very hard to build the state of Utah. And my hobby is also swimming, tennis, and that's all about me. And I hope to take more questions from you, and we stand ready to provide you more information about collaboration with Vietnam. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give a round of applause for our panel at this point. So we prepared a few questions, and some we're really going to get into it right now. I would like you to comment on this notion of trade barriers. Trade barriers now seems like some governments, for some reason, are implementing trade barriers. What is the position of your government when it comes to trade barriers? And I'm going to start out. Let's see how Romania. Give us the Mr. Dumitrescu, with my German accent. So if you could speak to that for a second, please.
Okay. Thank you for your question. Me gusta mucho.
Kein Problem.
La expresión de idioma español.
Sí, sí, sí.
A very interesting question. Having considered the last developments on the global markets, Romania is a member of the European Union. Of course, that this membership comes with the kind of a genetic status of a country. We learned in European Union that trade barriers are not positive or very positive for economic development. European Union was a great instrument not only for keeping peace in Europe, but also for making each and every member more powerful economically. Of course, that getting out of the European Union, each kind of bilateral relationship is based on every country's interests. And of course that there are some sectors that need to be protected. But this kind of protection needs to be balanced, and the mutual economic interests should be followed. And as the European Union shows to the world that the lack of barriers bring progress, prosperity, and peace, maybe that kind of model should be followed by everybody.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's talk to the United Kingdom here and maybe take a little bit Brexit into the equation. I'm sorry, I used the B word. And so if you could comment on that, please.
So obviously we're in an interesting position in the UK at the moment, in that we have signalled our intention to exit the EU, but we have not yet left the EU. So we have an amazing opportunity to get back more control of our own trade policy. But we're in this kind of intermediate period at the moment, where we are investigating all of these elements, but we can't actually start implementing any of that until we've actually left the EU. So yes, it's a very interesting time, and we are investigating it. So there are two things that I went on a course recently, and there were two elements that they said. The first thing is that almost every element about Brexit is very, very complicated, which I completely agree in. And the thing that any diplomat will always tell you is that any agreement is about relationships. And we are leaving the EU, but we're not leaving Europe. We will remain an outward-facing global economy, and leaving the EU doesn't change that. And if anything, those relationships become even more important. So.
Okay, thank you. Ambassador, how does Spain feel about trade barriers? Moving on. No.
We don't like them at all, you know. I mean, we are an open market. I think Cosmin, my dear Romanian and bright Romanian colleague, he put it very, very well. And he not only did it from a Romanian point of view, he did it from the European Union point of view. And I fully agree with what he has said. And I'm not going to repeat that. But Spain always has been an economy, a very open market. You know, we suffer the consequences of dictatorship for 40 years. Then what we did in 75 is to get rid of what General Franco did for 40 years. And one of the things was to open the country not only politically, not only socially, to the world, and to open it economically. Then we don't like barriers. We are, I insist, a very open market. You have to fix some rules. I mean, the game has several rules that you have to implement and you have to respect. But it's not good, you know. What's happening, and I'm not going to mention it specifically, something that you all know and that you are thinking with me at the same time, but protectionism is not a good answer. It's never is a good answer. Because with economy, you bring to other countries who need to be more democratic or who need to be more stable or who need to have an approach to a free world. Economy is very important. If you shut the doors, then you shut in many, many other things. You shut in, you're not giving the opportunity to your people and to your citizens to have a better life. Then I think protectionism is not the answer. And as Cosmin put it very, very well, the EU is an open and rules-based global trade system, and that's what we do. And then when we hope we can solve this latest problem that we can elaborate and discuss a little bit later.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
I would like only to add just a little detail. Usually protectionism, as we had the opportunity of analyzing during the history of economics, modern one, usually protectionism has a boomerang effect. It comes back negatively on the economies that install this kind of protectionism. Higher prices, more unemployment, less competitiveness, usually. This is what history proves us, that we are talking here about the lesson learned about all the economies in the world, not only European.
Yes. Thank you very much. Let's go to our Deputy Consul General. If you could tell us about the Vietnam's perspective on protectionism.
Oh, I think this question is really a conundrum because it's not easy to answer. Whenever you put in place trade barriers, I think that each side has their own reasons. But from my country's perspective, because Vietnam is a highly export-oriented economy, and we really want to have a WTO rules-based framework for all countries to follow. I believe that it's very important to open your economy, because if we see the recurrence of the protectionism, we will see the tit-for-tat dilemma or the retaliation from other economies that can trigger trade wars among countries. And that would be very harmful to all economies in the world. So I think that through dialogue and negotiations, we can find the answer to the trade barriers. But I underline that all economies and countries must abide by the WTO rules. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. First Secretary, if you could address that question, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I think the issue of trade barriers is a core issue in discussions about trade and especially free trade. Uganda is, as I can say, is a believer in free trade, and that free trade prospers us all, and that we all have benefits from free trade, because it creates more jobs, it fosters efficiency in production. The more we're able to exchange goods and services, both within the country and across borders, more especially across borders. Now, the Republic of Uganda, as you may know, may not know, is a geographically landlocked country. But for purposes of global trade, I would not want to look at it as a landlocked country, but as a land-linked country. And therefore, we wouldn't be the ones to encourage trade barriers and trade protectionism. That's why Uganda is a member and participates in the East African Community Regional Trade Agreement. And the purpose of this regional trade agreement and all integration efforts that are happening on the African continent to lower these trade barriers, to allow more cross-border trade, and to spur job creation and productivity. Now, all this cannot happen when you have protectionism, and we have, it just doesn't work. Certainly, all our economies are not at the same level. For instance, Uganda is mostly an agricultural producing country. And with that, we export, most of our export is in agricultural produce. Now, in some parts of the developing world, in the developed world, you find that some countries do subsidize that sector. Now, what that happens is it disadvantages primary agriculture exporters like Uganda. Now, when you have under the WTO rules-based system, through dialogue, and as we continue to integrate global economies, we realize that trade barriers are a thing of the past, and that when the trade barriers are removed and you allow for more free global trade, all parties benefit. I thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And last but not least, Consul General, please.
Thank you. Well, in the South American context, trade barriers, it's a thing that in some way still happens. Well, I had prepared, some remarks about, an example that happened to Peru in between 2013 and 2015. Well, Peru is an open economy since 1990s, but the problem, in the South American context is when left-wing governments arise, there is the temptation to install these trade barriers. And that is what happened, to Peru, that trade restrictions were imposed by South American countries such as Argentina, Ecuador, Brazil, and Colombia, and were resolved after bilateral and multilateral negotiation within the framework of the integration agreements. South America is divided in two big integration agreements, which are the Andean Community and Mercosur. So in the framework of these two big integration agreements, there are the spaces and the mechanisms in order to deal with the trade barriers, and which is that Peru were thinking when these situations arose. I am not going to mention exactly the kind of barriers imposed by Argentina, Ecuador, and Brazil, because there is not exactly the point, but how is Peru reacted when had to face these trade barriers. Peru acted as respectful of the international legal order and applies the provisions of the trade agreements to solve this type of barriers. Peru tried to not apply retaliation measures without legal support that may affect its international image. For this reason, each case is analyzed, seeking the best response and support in favor of Peruvian arguments, which has already allowed the lifting of all these restrictions. Additionally, new efforts are going to open new markets and make the best use of the advantage of existing commercial agreements along with the business sector, a situation that will be enhanced by the actions of the commercial office abroad. Okay. This is what Peru is trying to reach.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Consul. Mr. Ambassador.
Yeah, thank you, Franz. Just I would like to share with you something that now that my Peruvian colleague has mentioned, specifically items on Peru, I would like to tell you that you know why Spain has survived the crisis with a lot of difficulties, the last crisis that we had, because 70% of our business was international business. I mean, the most important Spanish multinationals, as Telefónica, that you perfectly know is the largest telecommunication company in the world, Santander, which is the second bank in the Eurozone and one of the first in the world, Mafre, which is the largest multinational insurer in Latin America, and Iberdrola, which is the fourth largest utility company in the world. All these, and apart from our infrastructure sector and companies, which is very, very active, let me tell you something, 7 out of 15 infrastructure companies in the world are Spanish, 7. Half of them, almost half of them. We have survived because we believe in the openness of the market, because we believe in free international trade. That's why we survived. Then it was thanks to everyone, thanks to the world, that Spain has navigated, has sailed, well, with some difficulties, of course, through this crisis. If you close the door, you're lost. I mean, you're lost. And you're not only you lose as a country, you lose yourself. What is happening in the United States, you're going to be the first losers. Not only us, you too. And this, if you put it on a Utah perspective, let's put it, France, on a Utah perspective. Right?
Go ahead. Yes, sir.
What have you seen on the facts and figures this morning on the screen? What are you going to do in Utah? I mean, it's incredible. The open-minded. This is the example. Sorry to tell you this, and I hate comparisons, but this is the example that you should follow in the United States. What the people of this state is doing. You behave internationally, in the international economic and political arena, in a completely different way. That's the way. That's the correct way. 3.1%, I heard this morning, of unemployment. 3.5. The United States is 4.5. You're under that figure. I mean, it's incredible. That's a technical unemployment. Does not exist any place in the world. Then, don't you agree with me, France? Yeah.
Yes, and we'd like to hire you after you retire as a spokesperson for Utah. No. Wow. But I think we bring up a very interesting point here. I think a couple of years ago I was in London, and I received an award in behalf of the state of Utah as the best economy in the United States by the Kalman Institute. And I asked, and they analyzed since the 50s, they analyze every state, many economic factors. And I asked then, after the award, and all the other states kind of, in America, you know, there's one winner and all the others are losers, was kind of good feeling. And so what was interesting to me was I asked them, the team, the senior team, why did we get number one? They said, yes, besides all of the economic factors, your government truly understands and is committed to an international economy. And in every sector, from school, from the education sector, trade sector, and all those kind of things. And you have young, enthusiastic people that have served overseas for their religion and all those kind of things. So,
and who speaks languages.
And who speak languages.
Don't forget that.
And we have now people suing the state of Utah, parents, because they are not one of the 100,000 that are where their kids are not learning languages. They know that children, if they don't learn a second language starting in first grade, you know, the brains develop differently, and they will be able to be prepared better for international trade. So we are really an island here in this country when it comes to some of these international aspects.
Do you know
now,
only 50% of the American population carries a passport? Do you know that? Just half of the population. What about the other half? And I'm not going to speak about congressmen in the Congress. In Washington, it's the same rate. 50% don't carry a passport.
Yeah.
I mean.
Okay. All right. Thank you for this surprising fact.
It's not surprising.
Okay.
It's in the papers. I mean, it's not surprising.
No, I'm just... Okay, so let's go, and Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned actually the next question has to deal a little bit with multinational agreements. So we're still on trade. A multinational agreement such as NAFTA, what we try to, the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the let's even consider, let's go from the European Union to the ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations as country, and in Africa, I think there's OAS and various other things. As countries are trying to form alliances for the focus of international trade. Does your government like multinational agreements or more what's the other term? Lateral agreements. So let's get started with setting the stage, the Kingdom of Spain. Mr. Ambassador, please.
Thank you. We love them, you know. Yeah, we all love them. I'm a professor at the University of Murcia in the southern eastern part of Spain, and I've been a professor there for 8 years. I'm a catedrático, what we call in Spain, which is a word that you can't translate in English. I try to explain to people I'm a catedrático, because a catedrático is someone who is top of a professor, with all my respect to professor. But you don't have a specific word for that, for translating that. But anyway, I'm a catedrático, and I deal with foreign diplomacy, external foreign affairs and diplomacy. And I give a course, a master's, on European Union and integration with Latin, Central and Northern America countries. And we speak a lot about NAFTA, and we speak a lot about TTPI, and we speak a lot ASEAN, APEC. And we really believe, and we are totally in favor in Spain of these agreements. We even prefer, and I have written this, multilateral agreements which include more countries, now more beneficial, not for the Spanish markets, but for the European Union market, as Cosmin has mentioned that, and international trade. Then we're really full. We are very sad that the United States has not subscribed and has not signed just some days ago the TTPI. It's a pity, you know. But anyway, there's still a NAFTA, which is very important. That's one of the most important international trade and commercial relationships in the world. And I hope that the 7th round, which is going to take place in about some days, it's going to take place where? It was at the Montreal, the 6th one in Canada, but I don't know.
One was in Washington, no, I think
it's going to be in Washington, that's it. It's going to be in Washington. I hope it will be successful and they can push forward NAFTA. Because NAFTA is not only important for the Mexicans. I mean, they consider that is very important for the Mexicans. Of course it's important for the Mexicans, but it's important for the Canadians as well. They have understood very well, the Canadians, what's the relationship with Mexico. And it's important for the United States, you know. It is. And, well, we believe them. We love them.
Great.
And we love this multinational organization, this multilateral, organizations.
Thank you very much. Mr. First Secretary, if you could comment on that, please.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll have to share the micro with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Regarding regional agreements, the Republic of Uganda very much supports multilateral agreements. And I'll speak especially for the agreements that the Republic of Uganda is engaged in. That is the East African Community. That is a grouping that brings together East African the states in the eastern side of Africa. That is Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, and recently the South Sudan. Now, that is, if you look at that market of East African Community alone, that's about 150 million people. Now, why do we support these free trade agreements, regional? It's one, because especially for Africa, we have very small entities, states, with fragmented markets. The Ugandan market alone is close to 40 million people, but that is small. Now, if you compare that with 150 million as East African Community, that is something better. So when we come to negotiate an agreement of trade with the United States, the United States is more comfortable dealing with a bigger market that is more integrated and that has harmonized many of the regulations. And that's why the East African Community comes in very handy for us. It's because not only has it helped us bring down the trade tariff barriers, but we're also looking at administrative procedures and regulations and policies, harmonizing them across the region. And this speeds up, this increases competitiveness of the region and of the countries that participate in this. Now, we're not only limiting ourselves to the eastern side of Africa, but right now, under the African Union, we are talking about coming together, the whole of Africa, in a continental free trade agreement. And discussions are already ongoing at the African Union in Addis Ababa, because African markets need to integrate so that you have more intra-African trade. Before that, most African countries have been trading with the European Union, with the United States, but we have not been trading much with each other. And most of this trade is in commodities, minerals, oil and gas. So commodity exports has been good, and trade is growing. However, the proceeds have not, they have not affected, what I wanted to say is that the benefits of this trade has not trickled down to the most vulnerable and the common person. So more intra-African trade through regional integration is what is going to really bring these benefits. That's going to create jobs, and is going to reduce poverty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I ask our United Kingdom? Go ahead, please.
Yes, we like free trade agreements. Yes, we like multilateral agreements. If you have global problems, then the only way to solve those is through multilateral agreements. So, for example, there is a problem in the global market with the oversupply of steel. Having a bilateral agreement to solve that doesn't work. You have to have a multilateral agreement to deal with some of those issues.
That's a good point. Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Vietnam is supportive of both bilateral and multilateral trade agreements. That's why Vietnam has concluded a series of free trade agreements. We now have over 16 multilateral free trade agreements with all partners in the region of Asia and also across the globe. And I believe that, take for example, the bilateral trade agreement Vietnam signed with the United States in 2001. Vietnam normalized the diplomatic relations with the United States in 1994. But you know that at that time, the bilateral trade revenue between the two countries only stood at around 30 or 40 million US dollars. But after the bilateral trade agreements coming into force, we increased the trade turnover by more than 400 times. And last year, by the end of 2017, the bilateral trade revenue amounted to 54 billion US dollars. And last year, during the trip of President Trump to Vietnam to attend the APEC summit by the end of the year, and after the earlier visit by Prime Minister of Vietnam to the United States, we concluded a lot of deals worth nearly 30 billion US dollars. In those deals, Vietnam buy a lot of commodities, goods and services from the United States. And I think that is why Vietnam strongly supports the FTA, because that we believe that this is a win-win solution to all stakeholders. And I want to share with you that by the end of last week in Chile, the 11 economies of APEC framework signed the CPTPP. That is the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is a step forward for 11 economies of APEC, because after the withdrawal of the United States, the previous name of CPTPP was TPP, or the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But then without the United States, the remaining countries still very strongly committed to promoting the FTA among them. And I believe that such multilateral agreements will benefit all countries and economies. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I would like to ask another question, if that's okay, and then we're going to take a break because I'd like to go into another topic, and that is sustainability. We had the mayor very passionately speak about Salt Lake City, Utah, some of the challenges that we have when it comes to clean air a couple times a year in Salt Lake City, being in a valley and all those kind of things. But and one of the questions was about the Paris Agreement. Maybe you can address that in your answer, how your country feels about the Paris Agreement and about the United States withdrawal of the Paris Agreement, Climate Accord. And then the other thing is, maybe what does your country do to promote sustainability? Let's talk about best practices for a minute. We have some companies here that are in the energy space, so it might be interesting. And let's start with this Consul General from Peru, Mr. Denegri, please.
Okay. Currently, environmental issues have moved from a focus on the conservation of natural resources and prevention of local and regional pollution to become a central aspect of the Sustainable Development Agenda. In this context, Peru managed to maintain and even strengthen its credibility and leadership in the exercise of the COP20 chairmanship on climate change in Lima in 2014. This conference contributed to the adoption of the Paris Agreement and its subsequent signature on April 2016. The main challenge in the short and medium term for Peru are climate change, oceans and marine pollution, principally participating actively in the next multilateral and regional meetings for the implementation of the Paris Agreement. In the topics of biodiversity, Peru is a very diverse country with three main natural regions, the coast, highlands, and rainforests. And in these matters, we try to articulate plans, programs, and to implement the commitments adopted by the Paris Agreement. Peru is on the track to try to become a member of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And this is the goal of Peru is to become a member, and this organization established some remarks and some goals that Peru have to fulfill, and this is a way to make innovation in our public policies in order to get a more sustainable economy.
Great, thank you. Mr. Dumitroscu, please.
So I'm trying to be brief. Romania has one of the best positions in Europe regarding the clean environment and the emissions. It's statistically stated by the European Union Commission of Statistics. And just to increase this sensation in the public, I'm just going to tell you that the renewable energy figure, so the power generated in Romania by renewable energy production is 43.8% of the national total power generated in Romania. Most of it is hydro. The wind is the figure with hydro is 29.5. The wind energy is more than 11%, and it's growing. So from this point of view, I think that Romania's policies are very strong, and not only for the clean environment and emissions, but also for gender equality. I read the statistics just the other day telling that Romania has the first position in Europe in what the difference between the salaries is concerned between women and men. Of course, that sustainability is one of the main concerns of any national or regional or local authority, and Romania strongly supports the development of this topic at all levels. Thank you.
Let's ask the First Secretary, if you could please tell us about what your country does in terms of sustainability.
Yeah, thank you very much. In the Republic of Uganda, we recognize that economic growth and sustainability must go hand in hand. In other words, that we cannot just have economic growth in the absence of conserving the environment. And especially for the Republic of Uganda, that is an agricultural, mainly dependent country, we feel the effects that climate change is bringing because of the global warming and increase in greenhouse gas emissions, because most of our agriculture is rain-fed agriculture, and so we starting to see a pattern of changes in the rainfall pattern, that prolonged droughts, sometimes flooding, and many of these is because of environmental degradation, and so it is now government of Uganda's priority to have sustainability incorporated in its development policy.
Could you tell us an example?
Yeah, some examples include reforestation, restoration of wetlands, and for every development project to do environmental impact assessments and make sure that production is done in a sustainable way. Thank you.
Thank you. Vietnam, if you could, let's talk about sustainability, please.
Like other countries, Vietnam also committed to promoting sustainability, and at the national level, we put in place the national strategy on sustained growth and sustained development. And after that, we put forward the national target programs with a lot of substance and action plans at the local levels. And I want to come back to the Paris Agreement. You may know that this is the highest level of all countries in the world to cutting down the emissions and to develop low carbon economies in order to keep the temperature, the average temperature of the world below the increase of temperature of the world below 2 degrees Celsius from now to 2050. And Vietnam also made a lot of strong commitments to the Paris Agreement. And this is the very first time that our world has a legally binding document for all parties. This is very important because before Paris Agreement, we just took actions on the voluntary basis, and there's no benchmark or the regular review for what your countries or my country have done. And we have the framework in place. The name of the framework is called Intended Nationally Determined Contributions, or INDC. This is a very specific program to reduce the carbon emissions into the air. And for Vietnam, we also working with the United States, for example, the General Electric and AES corporations. Last year, we developed a mega project worth of about $2 billion in the next 5 years to construct a wind farm in the south of Vietnam. And in addition to these projects, we also encourage the biomass energy, renewable energy, and we give high priorities to develop the incentives for the developers, accelerators, and the investors in the fields of wind and solar power. And for the ordinary people like me and my family, for example, we also promote and conducted the communication and education campaigns to change the behaviors of each and every person. For example, from classifying and recycling the waste at your house. I think that is a very small step, but we can change the way that we treat the environment. And this morning, I'm also very interested in the air pollution in Utah, because in Hanoi, the capital of Vietnam, and other big cities in Vietnam, Vietnam is also facing the same problems. We have more serious air pollution because of the coal-fired power plant in Vietnam and the manufacturing industries growing everywhere. And that's, I think that we learn a lot of lessons, good or bad, from the neighboring countries, and we want to change our behaviors. We want to have a better environment for future generations. And I believe that no single country can resolve their weather or their climate change problems alone. We need to join our hands. And we can do in very different ways, but I want to say that if we apply the innovation and high technology, we can achieve higher targets. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ambassador, please.
Thank you, France. Well, as you know perfectly well, we are a country of clean energies. We were one of the first country, among others, of course, that we have promoted renewable energies like solar and eolic. This is a win-to-win ticket, you know, France, because it regards the economic growth, and it's good, so the wellness through clean policies, you know. Everything is interconnected, you know. We were talking about free trade, we were talking about openness of our markets, and we should talk about as well as with sustainability. It's the same process. All things are interconnected. And Spain is one of the leaders. Please don't think that I'm a chauvinist, you know, as the French used to say. No, I'm not a chauvinist, but this is the fact, and this is the reality, and these are the figures. Spain is one of the leaders in solar power plants, power production, and solar plants in the world. Upon my arrival here in LA as a Consul General 4 years ago, one of the first things I've done is to inaugurate a solar power plant in the Mojave Desert. And in Arizona, we have, Abengoa has the biggest solar plant in the world. Then we are specialists on that. We have several companies in the northern part of Arizona and Flagstaff that I have visited. I think there are 3 of them, which not only deal specifically with the plant itself, but with the panels, because the panels are very important. And they build panels. They are already American companies, Spanish origin, under the law, under the regulation and the laws of this country. Spain is as well a leader in wind power production in the world. Iberdrola is the second operator of wind power in the United States. Then we really believe in clean policies, you know. What about the Paris Agreement that you mentioned, France? Well, it's very important. It's very, very important. It's a pity that, well, happened what happened. But anyway, we, in Spain, we penalize those as the European Union in general, and Cosmin knows this perfectly well, the emission, well, and my dear British colleague, which is, it's in the process of the Brexit, but still a European country. Aren't you?
We're still dear colleagues, yes.
You're still there. We love you. It's a pity that you left us. Why did you left us? I don't understand that. It was a perfect honeymoon. Been working for years and years.
And the support will continue for the honeymoon.
Do I have to get in the middle of this discussion?
That's
So
we
good,
support
so-
clean policies. Okay?
Okay, I could feel the love. No, in fact, you mentioned, Ambassador, you mentioned actually some of my answers to my next question, which is, what is the position of your government to renewable energies? At this point, I would like to call your attention to the energy conference that Megan Stettler talked about. It is truly an international affair, and we hope that you will come or send a representative there. It's from it's on May 15th, and it is an absolutely. We'll have 1,100 people from industry and governments come together. And energy is a very, very important factor here in Utah, as you can imagine. I mean, last year it was, and there are always demonstrators, which is always nice. And so we have all sectors represented. So, what is the position of your government on renewable energy? And could you talk about energy security in your country and how important is this to your government? And I'm asking. Consul General Dumitroscu.
Thank you, Franz. A very challenging topic. A very wise man, such as my great friend here, Javier, very intelligent, told me when I was younger that, Cosmin, if you don't understand a thing, just trace and follow the money, and you get it all. I would adapt this advice to the energy security topic in Europe, and not only in Europe. If you really want to fully understand what happens in Europe, just trace and follow the energy. Of course, that each and every country all around the world consider security and energy security as a national security issue. Blackout could cause disasters. And unfortunately, now energy security is linked to cybersecurity because everything is operated by computers all around the world. All the energy plants or the power supplies are controlled by computers. Of course, that there are some countries that are not independent from the energy point of view, and that they need to cooperate, especially internationally, with other countries which could not be very pleasant in their policies on politics, especially internationally, some of them breaking the international law. But all these countries that are addicted to this juice are obliged to cooperate because they need to import that energy. And if we study a bit all the transfer that are made from the trans-Anatolian pipelines, the northern one and the main one, to Europe, we can fully understand why many countries in Europe continue to have good economic relationships with countries in the Far Eastern Europe. I'm trying not to pronounce the names of the countries. So, fortunately, Romania is almost independent from an energetic point of view. As a matter of fact, is exporting a lot of energy, good energy, clean energy, as I mentioned before, having an enormous amount of energy produced with hydro and wind and solar, not so much solar, but with wind and water, we do have a great amount of energy that, and we are helping our neighbors. We are building now 2 pipelines on the territory of Romania. That's the latest news, the BRUA, Bulgarian, Romanian, Hungarian, Austrian pipelines, and the gas that was discovered in the Black Sea and that is going to be transferred to Europe, Eastern and Central Europe, is going to balance a bit the energy security issue in all that part of the world, making and changing the policies and the politics of the national states there. As a matter of fact, the most of the gas that was discovered in the Black Sea Plateau is going to be operated by a consortium of Romanian, American, and Austrian companies with ExxonMobil and OMV and the Transgas. We are working a lot there in Romania to make sure that we and our partners in Europe, all our partners in Europe, have a benefit from that, and that the energy security is not going to be an issue for any country in the European Union, in the world. Of course, that's a very long distance run, but we're working on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. First Secretary, Energy Security.
Thank you very much, Franz. The Republic of Uganda is, we are cooperating at the moment with the United States of America in the area of renewable energies, and that's a priority for Uganda government. And our cooperation is in the Power Africa initiative, which is a US government-led initiative aimed at boosting power production and energy security in the African continent. But more specifically for Uganda, I can say is that Uganda government has seen a great opportunity in developing renewable energies, because right now our capacity, generation capacity is about 840 megawatts of power, and that is all hydro power, which is a renewable source of energy. Now, of course, we have much more capacity than that. And our strategy is to more than double our generation capacity by 2020, to move it from 840 megawatts to about 1,900 megawatts of power. And that is only hydroelectricity, but we have not talked about natural gas, we've not talked about geothermal, all of which we have potential for. Now, as I said before, Uganda is a land-linked country, and our position gives us an opportunity to even export excess power. Under the East African Community Initiative, Free Trade Agreement, in the energy subsector, we are looking at the East African power pool, where power will be generated from Uganda, mainly from renewable sources and other partnering states, and this power can be distributed across the other partner states. This will improve competitiveness, and it will foster production. And we're looking at this as an immense investment opportunity as well, foreign direct investment into Uganda, because Uganda government is looking to get into public-private partnerships to develop this renewable energy sector, because the investment is massive. And here I'm glad to say that we have some partners from the United States already cooperating with us, especially in the geothermal and hydro power generation dams that are coming up. But we invite more, because the capacity is immense. And the energy sector in Uganda is liberalized, because we realize that it needs to go faster than the government can regulate it. For a long time, it had been under government control and regulation, but now it's a liberalized sector, and we are seeing the fruits because of the growth in renewable energies. And yeah, I thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Vietnam, please.
My country's position is support renewable energy, because we believe that renewable energy will be the future of humankind. You know that Vietnam has a great concern over the fossil fuels, because for the last 2 decades, Vietnam has developed a lot of coal-fired power plant in Vietnam. And then in recent years, we have seen the pollution from those power plants. And we developed new strategy. And now we changed the structure of the energy sources in Vietnam. We have many power sources. For example, 40% of the power in Vietnam comes from hydropower. And we still have 30% of the power generated by the coal-fired plant in Vietnam. But now we got a new option. We focusing on wind, solar, geothermal, and sea wave power. And in this connection, it's very important to have the transfer of technology from the developed countries to an emerging economy like Vietnam. That's why we set up the partnerships, the business partnerships, with a lot of countries in the world. For example, the United Kingdom, Germany, and the United States as well. And you know that after the tsunami and earthquake disasters in Japan, the approach of many countries toward energy has changed. And I think that Germany, for example, is one of the leading examples of the world. When the leadership of Germany decided to shut down a lot of nuclear power plants. And that is why the Vietnamese government followed the same way. Because 10 or 15 years ago, the government of Vietnam thought about developing a nuclear power plant in Vietnam. We're working with Russia, we're working with France and Germany and the UK. But after the disasters in Japan and the actions by Germany, our government decided to stop on the nuclear power plants because we have a fear about its consequences in the future to the country and the people. Thank you.
In my last trip to Vietnam, I don't think I have ever seen more motorcycles than anywhere else in the world. It was just amazing more than in India. It was incredible. United Kingdom, please.
So I think with these things, it's always easy to get caught up in the really big figures. But to sort of, we have our government has an aim to cut CO2 emissions by 80% by 2050. That's quite a long way away. So bringing that a bit more recent, we have a target which we're on course to meet of getting 15% of all of our electricity from renewables by 2020. Again, we're on target to meet that. Today, wind powers 2.5 million homes in the UK already, so we're quite ahead of the curve. And then we are a leader in offshore wind farms, so we have more than 700 wind turbines offshore already. And then kind of one thing to Google when you go away from this is something called the London Array, which is an offshore wind farm off the coast of the southeast, off the Thames estuary. So it's about 12 miles offshore, and it's the largest offshore wind array in the world. It looks pretty cool. It was the NASA's photo of the day at one point, so, you know, that's quite cool. And each turbine is taller than Big Ben with the wingspan of larger than a Boeing 747. So that's one of the kind of really concrete, specific ways that we're trying to kind of turn things around so that we can meet the ambitious targets that we've already set. And in terms of the Paris Agreement, yes, we absolutely support it. Yes, it's hugely disappointing that the US withdrew. But it's also really reassuring to see the steps that states are taking to meet those climate change obligations at a state level, even though a federal level withdrawn from the agreement. Okay.
In this, so I've got some questions from the audience that I'd like to pose at this point. We have about 20 minutes. And one of the questions is it says here to our European representatives or diplomats, but I think this will actually apply to everyone here. What is your position on the immigration problem the European Union is facing, or let's say the European issue the European Union or your country is facing? And could you comment on that, please? So let's start out with Romania.
France, I would like to say something.
On the energy? Okay. Okay. Spain would like to. Spain has the floor for energy. Yes. No. Go ahead. Go ahead, please. Okay, we'll revert back to you.
I talk too much. I'm kind of a preacher.
It's
but I
totally
promise
fine,
that
Mr.
it's gonna be-
Ambassador.
That it's going to be very, very short.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I would like to say something.
Please go ahead, sir.
Well, you know, this is a highly important question
Yes.
and a highly important issue. The two pillars of this question is reliability or confidence, and the second one is the price. You know, we're having a serious problem, at least in some countries worldwide, as in China, Brazil, even the United States, and Spain, on electricity, lack of electricity. We're having really serious problems on this. In Spain, we don't have a drop of oil, not a single drop. No? Then we have to reinvent it ourselves and try to implement new fields of energy. That's why we are so powerful in power plants and eolic plants and the reusing of water and transforming salty water in potable water. We're trying to convince the Californians to buy our products, which are very good, our plants. And then electricity is becoming a serious problem. For instance, let me just put you an example. In Spain, we haven't been able to connect our electricity network to Europe because of France. I mean, you know where, if you look at the map, you know where Spain is. Then there's no way in connecting with the rest of Europe our electricity network because the French, are not helping us in this issue. They have their own interest. They protect their own interest. You see, when you protect your own interest and you don't help the others, this is a problem. Then we're having a serious problem in Spain. The gas supplies, we don't buy gas from the Russians. We never did it, and we are not going to do it because apart from that, it's far away and the pipelines don't come to Spain. Then we have very strong agreements with Algiers, with the northern part of Africa. That's why our relationship with Algiers and the northern part of Africa is very, very important for Spain. And our gas supplies come from there. And, well, that's it. I wanted to say just this, that we're trying to push forward new sources of energy to try to cover up those holes that we have on electricity and we have on petrol.
And it seems like you really made a commitment to renewable energies, to some of the largest solar plants in the world.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing. Great, thank you. Okay, Mr. Ambassador and honored guest, let's go back to this question here. What is your position on immigration? It says here on the immigration problem the EU is currently facing, but what about your countries? Can you talk about immigration in your country and maybe specifically the European Union? I'll ask you, Mr. Dumitrescu.
So for Romania, that's not really an issue, but at the same time we are working together with our partners in EU, of course, and the sense of solidarity should work. And there are 3 chapters that should be taken into consideration. Is the humanitarian one, because many immigrants are refugees from territories like Syria or Libya. There is the second chapter of that of the economic immigration, so people coming from Africa or Asia because they are looking for a better life, but they are not refugees, so certain rules of the UN do not apply. And of course, there are the third chapter consists in the internal needs of each European country in what the labor is concerned. Romania, for example, has needs to bring some immigrants because Romanians took advantage of their status as European citizens and went to other countries. Romania has a great economic development, so the growth is really significant. It's the highest growth in EU last year, more than 7%, from which 8% are from industry. And Romanian companies and foreign companies that invested in Romania American ones too, need employees and cannot find it on the internal market. So there are some needs for each and every economy to bring immigrants from different countries. We are bringing from the eastern parts of the world, from Pakistan, from Republic of Moldova, but there are other European partners that take advantage of this exodus that is taking place now from countries that are facing great difficulties in war and satisfy their needs. So I think that 3 chapters should be put together, and the assessment that is done must be done considering all 3 of them. Thank you
very much. Let's ask our United Kingdom representative about immigration.
Well, immigration is an incredibly emotive issue. While we've been part of the EU and we've been part of the free movement that goes with that membership, one of the big questions is with Brexit is how that will be impacted post-Brexit. And for even pre the Brexit vote, there was a immigration target that the UK government had to reduce net immigration down to the tens of thousands, which has been a challenging target to meet. And it will continue to be something that the electorate looks at and measures people against as we go forward. But it's also worth saying about the value that migration has to a country. We have fantastic, our NHS has fantastic doctors and nurses that work in that, the same with our universities. And one of the things that we're absolutely committed to is making sure that people that are living in the UK, particularly from EU countries, continue those rights after we leave, and vice versa for the large expat British population that lives elsewhere in the EU.
Thank you. Ambassador?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was taking some notes. Well, you know, there are 2 ways in tackling this problem. Do nothing. Many countries do nothing at all. Or try to anchor those people who want to immigrate in their own countries. For instance, in Spain, the southern part of Europe in general. From Portugal, jump into Spain, from Spain to southern part of France, Italy, Greece, Romania in some ways. What you have to do, or try to do, is to control this immigration which comes from the northern part of Africa. I know that not all of them are Libyans, not all of them are Algerians, not all of them are Moroccans. They come from other parts of Africa. Then what you have to do is to try to anchor those peoples there. Give them the conditions from a political, from a social, from a humanitarian, from an economic side. Try to give them the conditions to have a better way of living. You know, in these 5 Maghreb countries, which are Mauritania, if you consider that a Mediterranean country, but we have put it in the package, Mauritania, Morocco, Algiers, Libya, and Egypt, let's call it that way, those 5 countries, there will be around 250 million people in about 20 years around the corner. 250 million people knocking at the European door. Then you have to do something with these people. Well, not all of them, but an important part of them. Then I insist, Spain has tried to convince our European Union partners to try to sign or try to come to an agreement with these northern African countries. Because if you leave them by their own, you know, in those people boats, what we call in Spain pateras, I can imagine, you can imagine the figures of immigrants coming through the Straits of Gibraltar, which are very much controlled now, or from the Canary Island, as the Italians have in, what is the name of that island that they have in the southern, Panta, I don't know what, an island that they have there, and receiving Libyan people. Then that's what we have to do. Pantellaria. Thank you, Cosmin. What we have to do is to create those conditions to anchor those people there. You know, in Spain, from the African side, the biggest foreign community are the Moroccans, which, by the way, don't integrate very well in the country. This is one of the problems, the process of integration. I mean, they don't integrate from a social point of view. You know. They get married with Spaniards, some of them, but there's a very strong cultural gap, religious gap, call it whatever. And it's very difficult. We love the Moroccans. We have great relationship. We are both kingdoms. The king of Morocco and the king of Spain are brothers. I mean, they call brothers each other. But there's cultural gaps. One of the good things that you do in this country is that you integrate your populations, your foreign populations. You have been doing this for the last 100 years. You have problems. I know that you have problems, but you integrate them. Have you seen those foreigners that acquire the American citizenship when they go and put their hands here close to their hearts and they sing the national anthem? I'm very much impressed of that. That means that it's working. At least it's working in this country. This country is like a sponge. I mean, you've been receiving foreigners since 120 years. Then in Europe, it's something really new. The second biggest community is the Romanians. We have a lot of Romanians in Spain. That's the other side of the coin.
That's
The
why we're
Romanians-
importing from Asia people for working in Romania.
The Romanians integrate very well. Why? First thing, language. How the language is very important because the Romanians are the Eastern European country, the only one who has a Latin language. And the Romanian, in 15 days, he speaks Spanish easily. Cosmin, has served as a consul general of his country in Valencia, and he knows this perfectly well. And he was very much close to the Romanian communities in that part of Spain. And then the third one, coming from South America, is Ecuador. Now, we don't have problems with Ecuadorians because, well, from a region point of sight, from a language point of sight, from a social point of sight, and they integrate very well. This is very, very, very important. Then let's try to anchor these people on their own countries. And in some way, we will, well, partially solve the problem.
Okay, go ahead.
Allow me only to complete something to what my friend said. The difference between people, immigrants coming here, and some of the immigrants coming to Europe is that people that are coming here are willing, some of them desperately willing to integrate.
That's it. That's another point, yeah.
Yes. Some of the immigrants coming to Europe, those ones that are maintaining that cultural gap, huge gap, do not want to integrate from the cultural point of view, considering that they are losing an important element from their identity. That's the thing that we together are trying to overcome. Of course, that the solution is to give them a better life in their countries, so they are not anymore attempted to leave their country and to come to a different.
That's a very important point. I remember when I was serving as an ambassador in the Netherlands, one of my best friends was the Turkish ambassador. And we used to have lunch very often, the two of us, talking about immigration issues. And you know, there's 500,000, the Dutch population is very small, it's 70 million people. 500,000 of those 70 million people are Turks. And when I told him, well, are you doing something with them? I mean, it's your citizens. He looked at me after looking at me 15 seconds and say, they're not Turks anymore. What do you mean they are not Turks anymore? No, they are Dutch. They are Dutch. The problem is, he added, is that when they go back to Turkey, they feel Dutch. And when they are here, they feel Turks. But for me, they are not Turks anymore. Then it's another problem. You understand what I mean? It's a Dutch problem. It's not my problem anymore.
We love our Romanians everywhere in the world.
And we love our Spaniards. You know,
I can feel the love in the room, so this is good. So,
Romanian, we love you.
yeah, there you go. So I've got one last question here that I'd like to read, and I hope I can read this. As a younger generation of Americans are beginning to enter into the global diplomatic field, what is one piece of advice you can give them in regards to differing themselves from the previous generation of American diplomats? That's a very interesting question. Okay,
I'm
yes.
curious who...
Everybody, go ahead, please. The United Kingdom is begging for the microphone. Just kidding.
So I would say embrace the power of social media and digital diplomacy. So digital diplomacy is the new buzzword. You can actually reach, you can't really replace going out and about and meeting people, but you can amplify your message humongously through the power of digital diplomacy. To give you one example, the British ambassador in Cairo, in Egypt, has more than 1 million followers on Twitter. And he can actually get messages out about British foreign policy, about British attitudes, about all of those sort of things on an individual basis far more effectively through using Twitter to the Egyptian population than he can from going out and having cups of tea and meetings and photo opportunities. He can do it more effectively through Twitter than he can through the traditional tools that are at his disposal. So that would be my one tip, digital diplomacy.
Okay, thank you. Twitter is a networking tool. Excellent. Vietnam, what would you tell Americans, young upcoming Americans, that you should do different?
10 points. You're very right.
As being a young diplomat, so my advice may be bad or good for you guys, but I believe that apart from social media, you need to travel as much as you can. When you travel, and you need to experience the partnership, the life from every corners of the world, because I think that we should and we need to respect the diversity of people, regardless of their origin, their race, or their gender. And I think that when you have an open-minded thinking, and you have an open attitude towards people from everywhere in the world, so you would be successful in your career. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. Mr. First Secretary, if you could tell these upcoming Americans what they should do better or differently, it would be wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. I think well, the advice I'd give a young diplomat, not only American diplomats, but anywhere in the world, joining this interesting career of diplomacy, is to try to learn about other cultures and how to interact with people that are different from you. Because many times we come with all these stereotypes that, especially as somebody who has served abroad, in my country, whenever I wanted to watch, to get some information about what is happening in the international arena, I either watched the BBC or CNN. But each time I went to a different country and saw what is actually happening on ground and what is being reported through CNN, I realized my mind was being biased. So you have to go beyond what you see on television and be objective and also learn what other cultures have to offer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ambassador, would you?
Yes, thank you. I think this is a fascinating and amazing experience, no? After 40 years, in business, And because one of the best jobs in the world is to serve your country. Doesn't matter where, but the most important thing is to serve your country. And I think diplomats, we serve our countries. If you dislike the policies of your government, which I'm sure that for Collette and for all of you and for Cosmin, sometimes you don't fully agree with that, you can try to make a move towards those people to trying to change those policies. This is very important. If you don't have this kind of an opposition within the diplomatic framework, you're lost. You're not a machine. You're not like a mule and you go straight to that point. No, you can influence within your government to trying to change those policies. If you agree with them, then you defend them, even with your life. one important thing that has been touched by our Vietnamese colleague and by Collette, the Vietnamese colleague, about respect. No, it's very important, the respect. To try to interpret the soul of the others. It's not you're first, sorry. No, misinterpreted me. No, you're first, no, you're first. There are countries who are first too. You have to understand those countries. And you said something important to Collette, digital network. That's very, very relevant and very, very important. At the end of the day, I'm sorry to contradict Seneca, which is one of my favorite philosophers. He was not the father of Stoicism. The Spaniards and the Latin in general, we are very Stoic people. It was Marcus Aurelius. But in fact, Seneca was one of his best students, disciples. And Seneca used to say, well, the only thing I know is I don't know anything. Well, was it Seneca? Yeah, I think it was Seneca, yeah, who said that. What I know is I don't know anything. Well, I'm sorry to contradict him, I know something. I know that practicing this job for 40 years has enriched me. For instance, Africa, I've been serving twice in Africa. I was ambassador in Angola after being deputy chief of mission in Tunisia some years before. I can assure you, I don't know who said that, I think it was you who said that. Africa hooks you, really. But look at Africa with the African eyes. It's the first continent in the world. Those open spaces, those people, how humble they are, how great they are, how they want to do things. Come on, don't copy models. I hate that. No. Africa, the continent itself, it's a great, great continent. And I discover myself. I used to say that I'm a white guy with a black heart. And it's true. I'm not being diplomatic just to ring your ears and something like that. No, this is true. Then the misconceptions that we have about Africa? No, you're wrong. Come on, read Capucini's book, Ebony. Read it. I read it 3 times. Read it. And you will get into the soul of Africans and you will understand what is Africa. Sorry to mention Africa specifically, but it was probably one of my most fascinating and exciting postings that I had in my career. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have the president of the Utah Africa Chamber of Commerce here. We're also very grateful, Thomas. Okay, what would you tell some aspiring diplomats?
Okay. Reaching compromise through negotiation. That's the art of diplomacy. To my students in the Romanian Diplomatic Institute, when I teach there, I give joking, of course, a different definition. The art of saying nice doggy until you find a rock. That goes too. I wouldn't like to give lessons to any diplomat of any country, young or old. I would say that any young diplomat shouldn't try to differentiate himself or herself from the older, experienced ones. A young diplomat should learn from his own country diplomats, from the other country's diplomats, and then he should keep in mind that his profession is about keeping peace and prosperity for his country and for the partners of his country. And that the art of diplomacy is about innovation, but keeping in mind that they have to love their country. And that creativity and innovation are a future for any profession. Digital diplomacy is very important. It's a new concept, very interesting. And I support the opinion of my British colleague. But I don't think that they should be different from the older American diplomats, because they are doing a great job. If they are doing a great job, they should continue that great job and use the methods of the traditional diplomacy and using their creativity and innovation for adapting the future of the diplomatic policies for the new challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Consul General. You got the last word.
Well, a bit words about my personal experience. I did my school in Peru, my university in Peru, and all this time, I was thinking, what would be, the situation, if I would have studied, some courses of my university life abroad, Then, when I finished the university, I had to, I applied to the Peruvian Diplomatic Academy. I had to study 2 years more in Lima. And then, I got the opportunity to go to United Kingdom for 1 year, and I made an LLM in Nottingham University for 1 year, and that changed my mind, I share a flat with a guy from Ghana, with a guy from Germany, with a guy from China, and another from Italy. And it was incredible, how your perspective of life, could change, when you discover, that the world, have so many contrasts, and that is very, very important for a career diplomat, to not only to know people, but to understand different idiosyncrasies, different customs, and it will serve, in a great manner, when you apply, these experiences, for instance, when you have to negotiate, and when you have to negotiate, as well, thinking, in the interest of the others, because, each country has, their own interest, that they will try, to put before, but the art of diplomacy, is more than that, and this is why, one advice, for young diplomats or students that would want to become diplomats is to obtain some experience of studying abroad. That's it.
France, just a small
Of course, Mr. Ambassador, I yield in reverence.
I'm a very annoying guy. No, but always give a diplomacy a chance. Always. Before taking different steps or other steps. Always give diplomacy a chance. President Trump has been criticized because he wants to get into a dialogue with his counterpart, the leader of North Korea. I've read some terrible editorials and some terrible articles in the newspapers in this country about this issue. I'm sorry. This time I agree with Mr. Trump. And I think he's doing the correct thing. Dialogue. We need dialogue. I mean, if you wake up in the morning and ask, what are you going to do today? Dialogue. My 3 priorities. Then talk to the North Korean. Trump and his advisors are clever enough and bright enough to know how to tackle this thing. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of talking. Then always give diplomacy a chance. And what the President of the United States, who's been elected by the American people, like it or dislike it, he's a democratic president, elected democratically. He has given, or he has been offered, to give this chance for diplomacy. Then talk. It would be better for all of us. Right?
So to summarize, dialogue, and give diplomacy a chance. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. Please let's give our panelists a round of applause. We thank you very much.